Hey, how's it going, everyone? Good morning. Hope everyone is doing fantastic. Feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. I have a very special segment today with a very special guest, one of my favorite guests that I've interviewed in the past, Emal Bariali, who's going to be joining us shortly. But in the meantime, just wanted to get you folks pumped up. And feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. Let me know who you are, where you're tuning in from. Looks like the alert is out. And we are live. Awesome. So feel free to introduce yourself in the comments, folks. Let me know if the audio is clear, the video is clear, and all that stuff. We're going to be talking business analysis today, all right, with my special guest, Emal Bariali, who's going to be joining shortly. Now, just to give you a heads up, for those of you tuning in for the first time, welcome. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Dean Kulaweera. So every week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone, I'm right here live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, to bring you folks job search tips, advice, strategies that you can apply to your job search. Now, we got a special Tech Talk segment today. So in my Tech Talk series, I invite experts from the tech industry, from the tech space to come in and share their challenges, successes, wins, advice, tips, strategies for people interested in tech. All right. So again, today's guest, Emal, his specialty is in business analysis. So again, feel free to. So he's going to be joining us joining us shortly, folks. So make sure you introduce yourself in the comments. I'm also going to be opening up to questions as well. So I will be sharing a link during the conversation as well. We'll be responding to any questions you might have from the comments, but also I'm going to be sharing a link to those of you who want to join us live and ask Emal your question live on the show as well. All right. So we got my friend Krunal in the house, all the way from India. Good to have you here, Krunal. Thanks so much for tuning in. We got Raphael in the house. Raphael says, we see and heard you correctly, tuning in from Toronto. Awesome. Good to have you here, Raphael. And thanks so much for tuning in. And again, shout out to everyone tuning in. All right. So before I bring in Emal, who is the special guest today, just wanted to, again, have you remind yourself and mark your calendars every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone. I go live right here to help you folks out in your job search. Right. So our guest today, my special guest today, is Mr. Emal Bariali, who is a senior business analyst and founder of the BA Blocks community. Now, Emal is a practicing business analyst for over 15 years in many different domains across the private and public sectors in Toronto, Canada. He currently provides BA consulting services for large-scale business transformation projects. And Emal also is the founder of the BA Blocks community and training program. Folks, the BA Blocks community is an amazing fantastic community. Emal was kind enough to give me access myself and mine to kind of check it out. And it's a fantastic platform with so much great resources. And I'm definitely going to have Emal talk about the BA Blocks community shortly as well. And what we're going to be discussing today, now we're going to cover many areas, but I'm going to be asking Emal to talk about business analysis trends, given the current market environment that we're in. Where I'm also going to have Emal talk about the 2020 Scrum Guide. I'm also going to be having Emal talk about his experiences on the front lines. He just came off from a big contract with a well-known consulting firm. Not sure if I'm allowed to say the name of the company, so I'll let Emal talk about that himself. But he's going to be talking about what he's noticing hiring managers and project managers are looking for in their BAs. All right. So without further ado, folks, and feel free to keep the comments coming in. I'm going to bring in my amazing guest here. Emal, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you back.
Always glad to be here. Thanks for having me again, Dean.
No worries, Emal. So I know you're a busy guy. So it's really a privilege for you to set aside the time, spend some time with us and share your tips, advice, and your strategies and your observations of what's going on out there, in the BA space, right? And just a heads up to everyone, one thing I really like about Emal is, and folks, you can expect him to be very forthright, very frank, and very much to the point in terms of what's going on out there. He's unapologetic about expressing his views, of course, in a very professional way, because Emal is a very professional guy. But he has some things. He has some somewhat controversial, thoughts about Agile and Scrum and all these things. So we're definitely gonna get into that shortly. All right. Now, before we begin, we just have a few shout outs for you, Emal, in the comments. We got Julie tuning in from Toronto. I believe
Julie, shout outs.
yeah, I
Yes,
believe I've seen Julie on the BA Blocks community as well. So shout
that's
out
right.
to Julie. We got Krunal. He says, I just joined the conversation. I referred Emal's video from YouTube. Very helpful BA Block channel. Awesome. Fantastic. So we got a fan in the house here. Sorry, it's actually, yeah. So he said Emal. Sorry for the spelling mistake. We got Raghav who says, hello all, good to attend Dean's session today. I'm a digital marketing specialist by profession, looking forward to making new connections here. Awesome, good to have you here, Raghav. So without further ado, Emal, now, you've obviously been out there and you're a guy who's, in the field, in the space and on the front lines. So before I definitely want to talk about the trends and, the 2020 Scrum Guide and all that stuff, but in general, Emal, like what have you been up to since we last spoke, and what are you noticing since the onset of the pandemic?
What I've been up to since the last time, all right, it's a bit of a long story. I'll shorten it down. So I've been focusing a lot in helping the members inside of our community really start to understand the BA profession. What we did is we launched our requirements and functional specifications course, where we had a bunch of students come in and learn how to actually produce requirements and specifications in a compressed 8-week period. Very stressful, but very helpful. And also I did a consulting engagement with Capgemini, I work with one of their clients to basically help them to do a couple of different things that they needed to have done. So we can talk about that as well. But a lot of stuff been going on since the last time we talked, and I'm happy to talk about anything and everything in the BA profession. I love it.
Awesome, fantastic. So folks, you heard it right there. So folks, any questions you have for Emal, I'm definitely going to go through any questions as we move along the conversation. So feel free to put it in the comments and keep the questions coming. And surely I'm going to share a link for those of you brave enough. If you want to, join in live and ask your question to Emal through audio, or maybe you want to have your camera on as well. Hey, that's you're more than welcome to do that as well. I will share the link for that shortly. All right. So Emal, kind of getting right into it. I mean, obviously, I definitely wanted to speak about some of the trends that you're seeing in business analysis. And I know one of the things we chatted about was, stakeholder workshops are primarily being held online now. And I know that you had some, a few tips in terms of the enterprise tools that you wanted to talk about. But before we get to those specifics, like, what are you noting? Like, what has changed? I mean, from how things were done in terms of the stakeholder workshops prior to COVID, as well as right now. Like, what are you noticing?
So, I mean, the biggest change, as we all already know, and I think that's been talked about endlessly, is the fact that everything is online now. But what that specifically means for business analysts now is that our jobs have gotten a little bit harder because of the fact that when we used to do things live, you had a lot of benefit being live with people when you're running your workshops. Now that things are online, you have to learn a specific tool set that it really kind of dominates the enterprise landscape. But even more so, you now have to learn a lot of the workshop skills like crowd control, setting an agenda, time boxing things, all of those things. Now doing those things online is really like almost another skill set that now you're having to build on top of the skills that you had for doing workshops in person. And so from a business analyst perspective, that is the single biggest major new skill that I think everybody has to learn, right? Outside of, doing requirements, specifications, SQL, all of that good stuff aside, if you are looking to figure out how to operate in the new landscape that we're up against, making sure that you learn to run your workshops in a virtual environment, that's the single focus that you should be putting all of your time towards right now. And also, I see that things moving forward, if a lot of companies start to work from home permanently or even more often, that's going to be a skill that's going to be sticking around. So it's definitely worth investing in.
Okay, gotcha. Makes sense. Now, Emal, I'm based on your, obviously, you just recently came off a big contract, but in your experiences doing these workshops over, virtually, Zoom or whatever platform that's being used, what are your observations in terms of some potential challenges or specific challenges that one might face when conducting these workshops virtually?
First biggest challenge is tech by far. So when you're in a in-person workshop, you have some tech to work with. And even if that tech breaks down, you can continue your workshop without, major disruptions a lot of times, right? Projector doesn't work. You can pull up a TV screen, or everybody can huddle around a screen and see what's going on, rely on the handouts. If your tech breaks down in a virtual workshop, especially if it's your streaming service, it's game over for that workshop. You've basically wasted a lot of people's time and a lot of people's attention. And so challenge number one is that make sure you get your tech in order, right? Make sure you learn how to use the tools. As simple as it may seem, it is probably the single biggest factor that affects the fluidity of running a workshop like that. So I would say tech is number one. Number two is your attention span as a business analyst. So when you're running a workshop, oftentimes, and you're in a room with people, you have a lot of breathing space. And I mean that really just kind of mentally, because awkward pauses in a room don't seem so awkward because you can read people are reading body language, and there's a lot of communication that's happening that is not verbal, right?
Yeah.
In a online workshop, things are very different. It's very much like radio. You can have almost no dead air at all. And so what that tends to do is that now you have to make sure that you have a lot more mental stamina to be able to run the same 1 hour workshop. Is going to take a lot more mental stamina, because you don't want to have a lot of dead air where nobody's really speaking about things, and there isn't much momentum in the actual workshop itself, because that dead air is basically one of the things where that starts people, gets people down the path of not really paying attention to you very much. So keeping that momentum up now has become much more difficult when everything is online, right? So I would say that those are the two biggest challenges. Again, there are some other challenges that come with the fact that, again, we're all online. You can't read a lot of body language, so it might be harder for you to detect some resistance in a workshop against, for something that you're talking about, where if you're in a room and you could look at somebody's facial expression, you'd be able to say, hey, is there a concern? Do you not agree with everything what we're saying, right? A lot of that stuff is completely lost, and I don't think we can underestimate the effect that it has on an analyst's ability to run a workshop, because I'll tell you, the number of workshops that I just ran in the last 6 months, that to me, I'd done online workshops before, supplemented with in-person workshops. But the workshops that all of my workshops are now online, and many people don't turn on their cameras. So now it's a very different type of conversation. So make sure that you can find opportunities to practice that if you possibly can. Be able to run those workshops, share your screen. And I would say that the one last thing that you want to kind of practice a little bit here is to make sure that you can start to respond in real time to the concerns and the questions that kind of come up, right? When you're online and somebody throws out a question, a lot of times you might not have enough time to think it through, write it down, just kind of make an expression to say, hey, I'm thinking about it a little bit. You have to get a little bit better at responding in real time. So it's putting a lot more pressure on analysts to be able to do the work, but that is the fact that we're up against right now.
Okay, amazing. And I really like how you meant it. So, and from what you're saying, obviously there are a lot of, there are some nuances in terms of how things are different. And I think it's such a great point you brought up, because usually when people think, okay, yeah, I'm communicating with someone over video, it's the same as in person. We got the visual component and all that stuff, but it's not, right? It's not the same.
I wish. Yeah. I mean, my job has become harder as an analyst because of the fact that we've gone online. Now, there are benefits to doing things online as well, but workshops have become harder.
Gotcha. And we got a shout out here from Nanette. So Nanette, shout out to Nanette. Thanks so much for tuning in. Nanette says, checking in from Vaughan, Toronto. We got Vaughan in the house. And Nanette says, I like listening to both of you guys. Tired of spinning my head from textbook terms. Big fan here. All right, good to have you here, Nanette. Thanks so much for your comment. We got Mayuri says, I'm a master of computer applications looking for junior business analyst positions. Awesome. So folks, for those of you who want to join us live, if you want to ask us your question live, I shared a link in the comments, so feel free to use that, and Emal is happy to answer any questions you have live. All right. So moving right along, Emal. Now, speaking of, sticking to the topic of stakeholder workshops, I know that there are certain enterprise tools that you feel business analysts should learn inside out. Can you tell? I know MS Teams, MS SharePoint, Microsoft Visio as well. Like, can you tell us about these and the importance of them, as well as your thoughts on why these are important?
Absolutely. So we all know, right? If you pay attention to the news, Zoom is the popular kid on the block, and everybody's talking about Zoom. But when it comes to the enterprise, Microsoft is still king of the enterprise, regardless of whether they're competing with Zoom for workshops, or whether they're competing with anybody else when it comes to modeling tools. Simple reality of the fact is that in the enterprise, Microsoft dominates, right? Because they have multiple products that work well together that companies find very attractive for the needs that they have. So if you have Zoom, for example, how do you get that to collaborate with your document management? Really, there's no real way to do it. Jira has some capabilities, but again, with Jira, how do you do document management in the way that an organization needs, right? There are a lot of different platforms out there, but nobody even comes close in the enterprise landscape. Nobody ever even comes close to being able to compete with Microsoft in that space. And so that's why I always advise people that if you want to learn how to do workshops as a business analyst in an enterprise environment, sure, you can learn it on Teams, sure, you can learn it on Zoom and some other products, but make sure that you learn Teams inside out. Twice now, I have had different clients that I've been working with where I've sent them a Zoom link, and they've replied back to me and said, "Hey, can we use Teams, please?" I said, "Sure, absolutely. I have it installed. I do use it. I'm just kind of when I'm outside of the enterprise, I tend to use Zoom a lot more, right?" So that's the reality of the fact is Microsoft dominates, and Microsoft Teams should be your primary choice for learning a tool to run your workshops and to collaborating with everybody else. Now, just on that front, I would say that additional tools that you want to learn, and this really has to do with the tight integration between Teams and a lot of the other products that they offer. SharePoint is the next big thing that you want to make sure that you master. Again, seems like a simple thing, but if you learn to master it, it just makes you so much more efficient. There are features in SharePoint that I use that a lot of my clients who have been using SharePoint for years don't even understand. And as soon as I show them a couple of things, it makes their lives way easier. So a lot of those types of tips and tricks you want to learn, and cannot forget Microsoft Visio. I know there are multitude of tools out there, Lucid Charts, etc., etc., etc. Nobody can compete in the enterprise with Microsoft Visio. Not only is it my favorite tool, but it is my favorite tool because regardless of which client I work with, it's always Visio. With one exception, throughout my entire career, Visio has been the modeling tool that that gets used in the enterprise. And that's just a testament to the fact that it does the work properly, but it has massive buy-in from enterprise managers and their customers. So those three tools, I would say, are the tools that you want to try to master. Again, I know if anybody's here looking for really like a fancy answer to the question, the enterprise isn't that fancy. I'm going to be honest with you. All right. You just learn how to use the tools that they use really, really well if you want to become a high performing business analyst. That's really the kind of the simplest response that I can give.
Okay, gotcha. And this ties in with I know something that you always talk about quite, and we've chatted about this as well, right? You always say this, like master the basics, right? Master the basics, master the fundamentals, and that's my philosophy as well. Even when we're talking, job search stuff as well. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. Now we had a question here, Emal, from Sairam, my friend Sairam in the house. So shout out to Sairam. Good to have you here, my friend. Saram says, "Hi, Dean. I want to start my career as a business analyst. I want to get suggestions from Mr. Emal how to get a kickstart in my career as a business analyst." Any thoughts will be appreciated, Emal.
So it really all depends. It's hard for me to give advice without really knowing much more about the situation. And so the general path that I can kind of explain to you what the general path is, that how business analysts get in. And Saira, maybe you can try to figure out where you fit in that path. So most business analysts get into their positions by having done a different type of a job within their organization and then switching into business analysis. So for example, if you're an accounts payable clerk, or if you're somebody who works in payroll, and you're the type of person who has analytical skills and you're always trying to make things better, you're a perfect candidate for a person who they would hire as an analyst as soon as the position opens up, right? The reason why they do that is because of the importance of domain knowledge for analysts. So an analyst walking in, not knowing anything about the business, is going to have a much tougher time, but it's going to take them much longer to become valuable to the organization as an analyst. A payroll specialist who understands the details of the rules of how their payroll system works, and what all the different union rules are that are kind of baked into the system to make sure that pay is working properly. Somebody like that already has a massive amount of knowledge that they've accumulated over the last, 2, 3, 4, 5 years working in payroll. Now all they need to do is they need to start learning how to do analysis work as a payroll clerk. So the suggestion really is that if you can't get directly into a business analyst role, use that as your job search strategy. It'll take you a little bit longer to get into it, but try to get into whatever role you can where you can accumulate domain knowledge about a certain business area, and then you can leverage that into getting into a business analyst role. That's by far, it's changing a little bit, but again, not that much. By far, the majority of business analysts that I've worked with have gotten into a business analyst role through that means. My career path has been a little bit different because I decided to become a business analyst like in 2000, and I just did it. But that's not the most common path that most people follow. So
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Emal.
I was going to say in Cyram, we have a lot of videos and a lot of questions inside of our community where I've actually addressed that. So feel free to join there and just go through all of our materials. I'm sure it'll answer your questions. If not, you can ask a question to our community members and see if you can get a little bit more help there.
Yeah. So I think this is like fantastic advice, Emal, because it makes total sense, and this is something I always talk about as well. Like it's more effective, it's more efficient if you can leverage knowledge, experience, expertise that you already have, and see how you can use that as your entryway into whatever field you're looking to get into. So I think it makes perfect sense. And from what you're saying, Imal, you can probably get into business analysis through other means as well, maybe like a totally new area where there's no intersection between what you bring to the table and what the role is looking for. But what you're saying is it's more effective, it's more efficient for you to simply leverage what you already have and see how you can use that as your entryway. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, the likelihood of you succeeding is much higher.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so there's a bit of a trade-off, right? So when it comes to you trying to enter into anything, you can try to take a direct path, right? Without any business analysis experience, you can start to try to apply for entry-level jobs, but you got to look at things from the employer's point of view, right? An employer gets a whole bunch of resumes and they see that they have some people who have domain knowledge that they're looking for, and then they compare that with possibly your resume where there's no domain knowledge, that there isn't really anything. From an employer's point of view, the person with domain knowledge looks
Yeah.
way more attractive, and there tends to be just a lot of people with that type of domain knowledge that are even applying for those entry level positions, right? And so trying to get in without really any domain knowledge is a little bit difficult to do. Now, there are a couple of other paths that you can take. If you're a technical person and you've done development work in the past, you're a perfect candidate. If you're a QA person, if you're anywhere really in the project execution sphere, if you're QA, if you're a project manager, I've had multiple project managers who are now interested in getting into business analysis. If you're anywhere in the project sphere, you maybe have a much better chance of actually getting into a BA role. But if you're completely outside the profession, you haven't done any project work, you don't have any domain knowledge, you got to start somewhere. So the easiest place to start is to get into a role, get some experience, and then try to leverage that into getting into a BA role. And again, it's a little bit longer, right? But when you're trying to build a career and you're trying to build a long-term career strategy, my own career, like I said, I decided in 2000 that I wasn't going to get into economics, right? That was a decision that I made. And it took me multiple years before I could actually get into a BA role, right? A lot of education, a lot of gaining skills, knowledge, etc. So you got to be ready to make that kind of an investment and some sacrifice to get into the profession.
Yeah, I think this is great advice, Iman, and I like how you highlighted to look at things from the hiring manager's point of view as well, right? Because obviously you got two candidates, like let's say there's two resumes on the table. One has a lot of relevant knowledge, experience, whatever that brings to the table. The other one is like in a completely new. This is a completely new domain for them. Obviously, the hiring manager or even the recruiter, for that matter, they're going to lean towards the person who's bringing something to the table that they can leverage, right, for this project. So folks, remember, like the passion, the enthusiasm, I mean, all that stuff is good, but I definitely agree with what Emal is saying. We also have to look at things practically and see how you can enter this field in the most effective and efficient manner as well. So definitely agree with that, Emal. Now we got a question or comment from Yana. So shout out to Yana, who's joining all the way from Spain. Yana says, I have an IT background, but I got lost in marketing and business development. I want to get back to my primary interest, data analysis. It seems to be a pretty good time to do that. Okay, great. Yeah, so I guess this is not a question. But yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that with us, Yana. If you have any questions for Emal, feel free to put it in the comments. But great to have you here all the way from Spain. So shout out to Yana. Thanks so much for tuning in. So now, Emal, kind of moving into the next area. I know that the 2020 Scrum Guide was recently released. And I definitely want to hear your comments about that. Was it's pretty much the same or whatnot, but
Yeah.
I definitely wanted to hear your thoughts about the 2020 Scrum Guide and I mean, if you feel if it's practical or how can one implement it and all that stuff. But I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that.
Practical, sure, if it's applied in the right environment, right? So again, what I'm really looking for out of the Agile and Scrum community and guides is for them to just recognize the fact that they're the philosophy as it's espoused right now in the Scrum Guide and many of the other manifestos that exist, the way that it's espoused and the way that it's promoted is a good fit for software companies. It's a good fit for startups. It's not a good fit for the enterprise, right? Because the enterprise is much more complex, and an overly simplistic way of trying to implement things leaves many gaps in an enterprise that Scrum just doesn't handle. None of the agile methodologies really handle. So it's practical if it's applied in the right environment. And if that's the case that it's done where it's in a software company or a startup, I say go full force. That's the way to go. You do not want to do anything related to waterfall if you're in that type of an environment. When you start to enter into medium, large size organizations that get much more complex as you start to add people, Scrum starts to break down. So with the Scrum 2020 guide and any new iterations of it, what I'm really looking for from that community is some acknowledgement of the fact that there is a version of Agile that can be applied to the enterprise that's not the pure version of Agile that is inside of Scrum. That's all I'm saying, right? I'm a big proponent of Scrum, Scrum and Agile. When I walk into an organization and I see that they're doing things in a way that is inefficient because of the fact that they've done it in a traditional manner, I myself don't want to work that way. But I don't take the Scrum guide and try to implement it as is inside of that organization. What I do is I cherry pick the principles of Agile that they can use and that they can start to adopt in their practices and make sure that it fits inside of the organization in a way that works best for them, right? So that is really the biggest message I want to get across here is that, look, Agile is helpful, Scrum is helpful. It's helpful to understand the principles. It's helpful to get yourself educated in that way, but just don't expect the teams to operate that way once you step inside the enterprise, because the world of the enterprise is much more complex than you're going to see inside of a startup or a software company.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha, Emal. Now, and basically from what you're saying, I mean, your role as a business analyst, and you mentioned some of these environments where you go in and you obviously see that things are not doing, they're not doing things effectively and efficiently. So what you're saying is not just a matter of sometimes you coming in and saying, okay, you're doing things too traditionally, you need to implement Scrum, but also there are cases where you go in and you're like, okay, Scrum is not being used effectively or efficiently at this. So I mean, it goes both ways. What you're saying.
Yeah, and like the one principle that I really love about Agile is the principle that you want to make sure you get your product in the customer's hands as early as possible, right? I mean, that principle overall, I think regardless of how you implement that, every organization should be trying to follow that as much as they possibly can. Should they do it through Scrum by getting rid of the project manager and implement it, putting in a Scrum master? Absolutely not. Should they try to get the product owner to start making decisions that they're not authorized to make or that they're not capable of making? Absolutely not, right? But should they be trying to get their products, their software systems out to their customers to get feedback? Absolutely, right? So you can start to see that Agile in principle is very, very helpful, and it can benefit organizations in a huge way if it's implemented in a way that suits their needs, right? The trouble that I see is that there is a lot of conversations around implementing the role of a product owner, for example, inside an enterprise level organization when it's just not a good fit. And I can talk endlessly about why it's not a good fit, but that's just a simple fact, is that if you want to have the product owner the way that it's described in the Scrum guide, you want to walk into an organization and try to implement that for an internal product that you're trying to build for those customers, that's going to break down very quickly. And that's a much bigger conversation that we can have. But the idea here is that you want to make sure that you're cherry picking the things that are going to work inside the organization and not really trying to force fit that organization into the Scrum guide the way that I see it being marketed a lot of times.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So Emal, so dumb question, and again, I don't work as a BA. I don't know much about Scrum or Agile, but going from that, Emal, like how does one as a business analyst determine like whether the organization it appears like they're trying to squeeze the organization into Scrum versus an organization that actually does need Scrum and Agile and all these things? Like how any tips on how one can differentiate between these environments?
And that's a very big job, right? Because as an analyst, typically you're not the one who gets to decide whether you're going Scrum or not. It's typically the management of the organization that says, hey, we've been doing things in a traditional way. We're not getting the turnaround on products that we want. We have a consultant over here who's going to teach us how to go agile. And then that agile consultant will typically come into the organization and try to implement Scrum or Agile or whatever it is. We as business analysts, we have to live in that environment, right? So now I've been in that situation countless times where we have a Scrum Master who comes along and the project manager is gone. And I say, all right, automatically you have a major problem here because the Scrum Master's not even close to the amount of work that needs to be done to keep this project going, right? Yeah. Problem number one. So as an analyst, there are strategies that I have, and there are conversations that I have with the other team members, and especially with management, to say, look, here's what's working, here's what's not working on the ground. Here are some of the recommendations that I can make of how we can make this better, right? Again, getting rid of a project manager on a major project and replacing them with a Scrum Master, it has happened on my projects, and I'm close to revolting here, because what we're essentially doing here is we're introducing this massive risk to the project, because we now have a vacuum of responsibility essentially on the project where nobody's really governing all the different pieces, and the Scrum Master is really just kind of playing the servant leader role, where in an enterprise it oftentimes doesn't work that well, right? So as an analyst, what you have to do is you really just have to kind of get yourself ready to deal with that reality as soon as it comes, right? So as an analyst, you enter in and let's say you've been working in an organization that's been doing things in a traditional way forever. Manager says we're going to go agile on our next project, and now so you scrap a big part of the requirements piece. You get a product backlog of a lot of backlog items that seem like it's just a laundry list of things that a customer wants, without doing a lot of the upfront architectural. We could talk about it forever, but there's a lot of things that happen, leaves a lot of gaps, right? So as an analyst, you just have to say, hey, like one of the questions I always ask is, who's reporting status to the steering committee, right? Yeah. I mean, I need an answer to that question, because if the answer is nobody, that probably means it's going to be me as the next person in line to have to account for whether the project's getting in or not. And if it's me, then how are we going to now do the analysis work while I'm now starting to do the project manager's job a little bit, right? Yeah. So you start to ask those types of questions to just show management that there are multiple holes here. We can work with agile principles, right? Let's try to see if we can get something out to the customer in a month, in 2 months. Let's put it in front of them, have them not freak out too much, and just let them know that it's not a work, it's just a prototype, and get their feedback on it right away and try to factor that in. A lot of the other constraints that exist in the enterprise is that you don't have unlimited budgets, right? And so you run into the trap, for example, if you start to go down that path of doing prototypes, customer says, no, I want that to be different, that to be different, that to be different. And if you have customers who start to do give you a lot of that type of feedback, now how do we know how much this product's going to cost? Because if we're constantly refining things and we're not really getting it down to a better product, the scope of the project can go out of control, right? Again, these are all issues that when you work in a software company and you have a product owner, right? Somebody at the VP director level who makes all the product management decisions, you don't even run into this problem, because they hold the budget, they make all the major decisions around what that product is going to release in the next release, and multiple releases down the stream, right? So you don't run into that problem. In the enterprise, IT holds the budget, your customers on the business side, and now it's your job to get these two people, right? The product owner role now is spread across two people. Yeah. And now it's part of your job now to get them to agree with each other before you could even start to do the analysis work, right? So, I mean, that's just one example of how things can go wrong. But as an analyst, you should just prepare yourself to be confronted with a lot of these types of issues that you're gonna, and have some sort of a strategy of making sure that you can still perform your work despite the instability that an agile initiative might create inside an organization.
Got it. No, I mean, so this is really fascinating to me. So I mean, obviously, Emal, as a business analyst, you have to probably navigate a lot of, well, I don't know if I should call it red tape and stuff, but certain barriers and things get in the way of the project, as well as, of course, every organization has politics and stuff like that. Yeah. So, I mean, how do you build that skill? Like, is it just a matter of experience? Like, how does the business analyst watching right now, and they're like watching you speak, and they're like, I have this whole, similar situation at this project I'm working on. How do you navigate these politics and get things done?
Well, some people I think are lucky enough to have some sort of, uh, they just have a natural sense for how to deal with people when it comes to politics, right? So
Yeah.
some people are automatically going to have that advantage on a lot of analysts if you don't have that. I just happen to be one of the people that's had to learn this the hard way. And
Right.
so the way that, I mean, when I started doing my business analysis work, I would observe very, very carefully about how my managers, VPs, directors, how they interact, how they converse, how they handle certain situations that, in my mind, could completely blow up the project, right? And they have such elegant ways of dealing with problems that completely keeps the obstacles out of the way of a project. Where if you were to leave it to me, it would probably blow up back then, right? So the first thing you can do as an analyst is really, if you're just new to it, just observe. Watch how the politically savvy people, the people who understand how an organization functions and how to really get over those types of obstacles, just try to observe them and try to understand their way of thinking about how to handle these issues, right? I tend to be a little bit too clear cut in many organizations. Somebody asks me a
Okay.
question,
Okay.
say, sorry, no, we can't do that. And here are the reasons why. And
Yeah.
I won't hear about it until 2 weeks later when, I've, apparently maybe I've offended somebody or I've said things
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't go well, right? That's just my natural disposition. And that's just the way I work. But over time, I've learned that there are better ways of saying things that if you employ those things, you don't actually create a lot of the issues that you would. So as a new analyst, observe management, try to figure out how they're thinking and see if you're capable of starting to put some of those things into practice yourself. That's the way I've done it in my own career. And I'm still working on it, to be honest with you. So
Right.
it's an ongoing thing.
Okay, excellent advice. Hey, folks, if you're getting a lot of value out of this, make sure you hit like, make sure you reshare with your network. Emal's sharing some fantastic, insights here. We got a question here from my friend Abhishek. So shout out to Abhishek. Abhishek says, joining from Toronto, 5 years of experience as a BA and past 1 year searching for relevant job after I moved to Canada. Would love to hear what I should do to achieve the same here. All right, so Abhishek, maybe if you can give us more clarity, like what exactly are you doing? What barriers are you facing in your job search? And I'm sure Emal would be happy to share his advice as well. So feel free to clarify that in the comments. What are you doing? What kind of barriers you're facing in your job search? Just a bit more clarity, and I'm sure Emal would be able to help. All right, but thanks for your question, Abhishek. Krunal says, Mayuri, you can send me the resume. Probably I can help. Hey, folks, this is why you need to be, talking about yourself in the comments here, right? So potential connection there from Mayuri. So Krunal, thanks for your comment. We got Elham in the house. Elham, good to have you here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now, we got a question here from Prashant. So shout out to Prashant. And Emal, you might have covered this already, but Prashant is asking, what, according to you, are the core competencies of a business analyst? Anything you want to add to that, Emal? I know you might have already covered.
Yeah. Stick with the basics. Learn how to produce business requirements and functional specifications as your core skill. So let's take this. Let's kind of a bit of a quick teaching session here, right? A business analyst does essentially 3 different types of tasks. They help management figure out whether the project is worth investing in. That's one kind of broad category of business analysis work. If you put together a business case says, and your management says yes, then you kick into the second type of business analysis work, which is project execution. When you're kicking in here from 1 to 2, a lot of business requirements work tends to actually happen in many larger organizations, tends to happen in the first phase, because for you to even be able to put a proposal together, you kind of really have to understand what it is that you're building, and you have to do a bit of requirements work to make that happen, right? So that's why I say learn how to produce business requirements, because that helps you cover a big chunk of the first stage of business analysis work. When you kick into actual project execution, that's when you need to get into the details to produce the level of details that your development team and your QA team need to actually build and test the system. That's where your functional specifications come in, right? So you're essentially, what you're doing is you're elaborating your business requirements into functional specifications during project execution. The third stage of, or the real third category is that once the project has executed and you've delivered some sort of a product to your customers, there is now a maintenance period, and that maintenance period can last 5 years, it can last 25 years, right? Depending on how long your organization keeps the product. And there's a lot of business analysts who do nothing but maintenance work, right? Because that's what they specialize in. They just learn a product really well, and that's the type of work they like to do. Your ability to produce requirements and specifications, you're doing mini versions of that all along as you're doing the maintenance of the organization. So that's why I always tell people when they ask me, hey, what should I do? Learn how to do business requirements and functional specifications as your core skill, and then try to start broadening out your skills as you need to.
Awesome. Fantastic. So Prashant, hope that helps. And thanks so much for that response, Emal. We got Krunal here who says, Emal, yes, facing the same problem, sending a Zoom link to the client. I get Teams link in response. You want to ensure internet speed when using Teams. All right. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Krunal. We got Yana. Yana says, in Europe, it seems that Zoom doesn't really exist on the business ground.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
That does not surprise me at all.
Right. And Krunal says, I got into BA after following Emal's tip. Once you work on Emal's advice, I can refer you to a good organization in India so that you have a good chance of getting selected. Happy to help. Awesome, Krunal. Awesome feedback there. Now we got a question here from Yana. So Yana says, maybe this is a naive question, but do companies prefer to have company-based analysts instead of remote working specialists in terms of security of data, trust, etc.?
So it changes from organization to organization, right? So some companies who, it really depends on the culture of the company. Does your management trust your employees, first of all, to put in a solid day's work from home? If so, then they're going to be much more lenient in letting you continue to work from number one. The second factor is that how does your company treat data privacy, right? Data privacy issues can exist regardless of whether you're working from home or whether you're working inside the organization. The risks are different, but I wouldn't say that there's a significant increase in data and privacy risks between working in the office and working from home, just from what I've seen myself. The risks are new, they're different, and so organizations have to learn to adapt and manage those risks. So it really all depends on your organization. It's hard for me to say broadly because it really all depends on the management of the organization, their tolerance for that type of risks. Is there a financial incentive for them to completely get rid of all the office space, for example, and have people work from home? Everybody makes that trade-off on their own. So I hope that kind of gives you some insights, but it's hard to say, make a broad sweeping statement about all organizations.
Awesome. Fantastic. So hope that helps, Yana, and thanks, Emal. Hey, shout out to Julie. Julie actually reshared the link, but yeah, in the comments, folks, Julie shared the link for those of you folks who want to join in and ask the question live. So feel free to do that, and thanks and a shout out to Julie for doing that. Appreciate that. So moving along, Emal, I wanted to move the discussion to what you're seeing in the trenches. All right, on the front lines. You just came off with an engagement with Capgemini. So, can you share us your observations from that? Like, can you talk about some of the skills that hiring managers and also project managers are looking for their BAs?
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate right now, your ability to run workshops. I won't talk about it too much. Make sure you got that down. Skill number two really is not really a business analysis skill, right? I think the one thing that managers are always looking for is a professional who makes themselves easy to manage. And as an analyst, there are a lot of different things you can do to actually make that happen. And we can talk more about that if you'd like. But what the single biggest thing you can do to make yourself attractive to a manager or to have a really good working relationship with your manager is to just make their life easy. Most managers, most middle managers, most director, VP level people, they have so many issues to deal with on a day-to-day basis that you might not necessarily be the biggest thing on their radar. And the more that you can do to kind of get yourself off their radar, but still get your work done, the better. So tip number one I would give you is that, and this is a tip I give to everybody all the time, always have a list of everything that's currently on your plate. As simple as it might seem, because I will never take a contract on without doing that, because a lot of times, if a manager is very busy and they have a massive team, they might not necessarily be keeping track in detail of who's working on what. And oftentimes, as an analyst, you can find yourself in a place where you have a million different things and a million people are asking you for those different things and you have no way to manage it. that's probably one of the things that gets people stressed out the most, is that they have a massive amount of stuff that they've accumulated. And even worse off, nobody really knows that they have all of this stuff, right? It's because it's within their purview. So I always have a document. I used to actually print it out and carry it with me in the physical days, but now it's always up on my screen when I'm having a workshop or a meeting with a manager or VP or a director. And anytime a new initiative comes up, I always pull up that document and say, all right, let's take a look at the list of stuff that we have. Help me prioritize this within that list, because I can produce this for you tomorrow, but I have to push this other thing out a little bit because, it's going to take a little bit of time. Your ability to do that, you cannot underestimate the relief that'll take off you. But not only that, it takes away your manager's concern about whether the work is getting done and where it is in the queue and how much work you actually have. Just by doing that one simple thing and keeping it up, you're making yourself very, very easy to manage. Because I've been in many situations where somebody says, hey, can you please take care of that? And I do not say, if it's a small thing, I can do it in 30 minutes, sure, no problem. But if it's something that's going to take me half a day and I got 10 other things that are higher priority, I'll pull out that list and say, all right, let's hold on a second. Is it more important than this one? No? All right, more important. And I'll just run down the list until it falls somewhere. I'll say you're probably going to get that next month, right? So that is... But your manager also is thinking, okay, at least I know that it's there. At least I know that I'm eventually going to get it. So that is the single biggest tip that can help you make yourself a little bit easy to manage. And even when you're in an interview, you can talk about these things to say, look, I'm usually very self-sufficient. If you just give me the support that I need at certain points, I can probably get a lot of this, the majority of this stuff done without even, you don't even have to see my face, for 2-3 weeks at a time, unless I have an issue, right? If you could become that type of a person and your manager just says, oh yeah, no, that person's getting the work done. And trust me, they'll hear about whether you're getting things done from their customers, right? And from everybody else. And so they kind of say, okay, well, yeah, that worked well, that didn't work well. And then they'll come talk to you when they need to, right? If you can get yourself to operate that way, you're going to be golden as a business analyst.
Awesome, fantastic. And I especially like what you said, Emal, about, hey, just see how you can make life easier for the managers, right? Or for the PMs, the managers, whoever it is. And that's Absolutely. How basically, that's what you're saying, is that, that's going to allow you to communicate your value to them.
Yeah. And you know what? I think we could probably have a whole podcast show to talk about so many different things that you could do to actually bring yourself up to that level, right? I mean, that's not just 30-minute conversation, because there are so many things that I've learned to do. Because I mean, my manager is just one stakeholder, right? I have a lot of peers. I have the architect beside me that I have to work with, and their development team. There might be, I've been on projects where the architect has 15 developers reporting to them, and I have a bunch of analysts reporting to me, right? I have to now try to see how I can make people's life easier up there and down here and across all over the place, right? And each of those can have different strategies and different tactics that you can do it. So I think that this could be an excellent idea for an actual podcast that we could put together for folks if they're interested.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. Yeah, I think that would definitely be a great topic to talk about in more detail, right? Because that's such a broad area.
Yeah.
So fantastic, Emal. So Emal, before we get into the remaining questions, I definitely wanted to have you speak about your BA Blocks community and how you can help business analysts out there. So feel free to let everyone know.
Sure. And you know what? I'll say the best thing you can do is just head over to bablocks.com, look at the community page, and you'll learn everything that you need to know. Essentially, what we do there is that we're up to over 2,000 members now. And we produce regular video responses and text responses to help analysts understand, the BA profession from all angles, right? There are questions that come to us about, hey, what should I do in my use case over here if this is happening? I'll provide a good detailed response if I can. Somebody else will ask me, hey, my manager's telling me that I should be doing this way, but I think I should be doing that. How do I handle that? Whatever your question is, you ask it, and we do our best to provide responses. And we've actually been getting a lot of people commenting about how much they've benefited from being part of that community. Awesome. But again, I'll leave it to people to decide for themselves. Currently, there's no cost, but it's not going to be that way forever. So if you're interested in joining, you have nothing to lose. Take a quick peek inside of the community. If you don't like it, don't ever come back.
Yeah, folks, and I'm not just saying this because Emal again, invited me to join the community as well. It's a great platform, very amazing user interface. It's so simple to navigate. and I just love the layout, and it's just so much great value in that community. So take advantage of it while Emal is still offering it for free. All right, so check it out, and I'm sure you'll have a great experience on there. Uh, so and also just to give everyone a heads up, Emal is definitely someone I'm going to be bringing back to the show in the future. So I'm sure we'll work something out. And hey, if you want to see Emal on the show again, let me know in the comments as well. All right. So we got some more questions, Emal. Are you okay on time?
Absolutely,
All right,
absolutely. Let's
perfect,
keep
perfect.
going.
All right.
Yeah.
So we got a question here from Raghav. So Raghav says, "What, as per Emal, is the future of a business analyst role? Considering the job market is very dynamic at the moment. So, example, over the next 5 to 10 years, what are the growth aspects in this domain? I'm currently working as a digital marketer. I'm planning to immigrate to Canada." So I think the rest is just a comment. But yeah, I guess the essence of the question is, what are the growth aspects within the next 5 to 10 years in business analysis?
It's a growing profession. It's growing every single day because more and more organizations realize that they need this skill set. Number one, like I said, I have project managers now who are trying to become business analysts because there's not only is it starting to become financially as lucrative, sometimes even much more lucrative than actually being a project manager or doing some of the other roles, depending on where you're at. Not only that aspect of it, but a lot of project managers, I think, are starting to see that project managers is always going to be around, but they're seeing the growth potential in business analysis. So we have a lot of project managers, we have a lot of software developers, a lot of QA folks that want to get into the profession. It definitely is a growing profession because I mean, I myself see the amount of contracts out there that exist, and that I get reached out to on a regular basis to come do this type of work or that type of work. So the volume of the work is there, and it seems to me like it's continuing to increase. I can't give you any specific numbers because I haven't actually done the in-depth research, but
Yeah.
I can tell you from my own personal experience that it seems like it's getting much bigger.
Awesome, awesome. So hope that helps, Raghav. So thanks for your question. We got a question here from Zara. So shout out to Zara. Thanks so much for tuning in. So Zara says, "Hi everyone. I'm joining in from Ottawa. I'm starting my career as a BA. Do you think knowing SQL and Python is a must?" Any thoughts on that, Emo?
SQL, okay, let me take it back a little bit.
Yeah.
For if you want to become a systems analyst, so you're much more on the system side, SQL is very, very likely something that you're going to need. Even if you don't think you need it, it's very good to learn because it gives you a lot of insights into the enterprise systems that you're helping to build. So that is usually when I get asked about what technical skills people should learn, I would say SQL by far. Python, much more limited. And so to the point where I would say don't even really spend your time investing into it unless you know for a fact that it's needed for a certain type of role that you really want to get into. I would stay away from Python. I would dive in feet first into SQL. So there are two different skills. If you want to be on the system side of things, if you want to work on like data migration projects, for example, if you want to be the type of analyst that does the third category of work, which is a lot of the maintenance work, those types of analysts typically need to use SQL. There are some exceptions to that, right? If you're, and we can talk about it, or I'll make it too complex, but if you're entering into an organization that does a lot of software purchases and they implement that software without building it themselves, in those environments, SQL isn't that helpful because you can't really run SQL queries on a
Yeah.
purchase software in most cases. But most environments where you have applications that have been built, custom built, SQL is the single biggest skill. In fact, it's going to be after a requirements course, SQL was the next course, but we may have a surprise there. But that is the course that we were teaching to folks because it's such an important skill to have.
Awesome, amazing. So Zara, hope that helps, and thanks so much for your question, and thanks so much for tuning in. We got a comment here from Kruno. So Kruno says, "I like that Scrum promotion discussion and can help to save time documenting things which are not required. Of course, some points are important to document."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Krunal. We got Suhas here. Suhas, shout out to Suhas. Suhas says, "Dear Imal, I'm a big fan of your workshops, especially Rishi's interview. Helped me a lot in
Excellent.
preparing the interview process. Thanks a ton. May I know how to write a proper user story that it covers all the functional and technical concepts? Thanks, Dean, for the session. You rock." Hey, no worries, Suhas. So any thoughts on that, Imal?
I would say my first thought is stay away from user stories because you have a better tool out there called use cases that you could use to actually do what it is that you want to do. User stories, again, are one of these things where in a user story, you can give a general sense of what it is that a customer is requesting. It's a type of requirement, but it is really not the best in my perspective. From my point of view, not really. I've never used user stories. Tried using them once and I found them to be lacking in many different ways. So I would say stay away from user stories, focus on use cases. And I mean, teaching you how to write a use case, it's difficult to do here, but that's something that we could talk about inside our community if you'd like.
Awesome, fantastic. So Suhas, hope that helps, and thank you for your question. We got a comment from Nanette. Nanette says, all BAs here who are still out of a job, let's form a consulting agency. Let's discuss and formulate a plan.
I love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good, Nanette. And Nanette was laughing at your comment about the hiring manager or the project manager not wanting to see your face or something like that. Yeah. So good to have you here, Nanette. And Zara says, thanks for answering. Awesome. So looks like that's all the questions that we have from the comments. So Emal, I mean, for people who want to connect with you or follow you on social media, like where are you active and where can people, follow you for more content and more information about how you can help them and all that?
Yeah, bablocks.com is the first place. We have our podcast listed there, but more importantly, we have our links to our community inside there. Secondary place would be LinkedIn. So I'm here on LinkedIn. You can actually just look at my profile. If you even have questions about my previous work experience, my entire resume is basically on my LinkedIn profile. I'd be happy to have any kind of conversations about anything that I've done there. So those are the two main channels.
Awesome. Fantastic. So Emal, thanks so much for your time. As usual, really enjoyed the conversation. I personally learned so much. And hey, folks, look, I'll be frank with you folks. Like I do these conversations for selfish reasons because as a tech recruiter, I want to stay up to date for what's going on out there in tech, right? And I always enjoy these conversations because I get to learn so much about the industry that I recruit in, right? So and of course, all of you folks tuning in benefit from the conversation as well. So thanks so much, Emal. Again, it was a pleasure. Definitely look forward to chatting again. And also heads up, everyone. I'm going to be a guest on Emal's show as well. So he will probably release that podcast at some point in the future. So look out for my interview on Emal's podcast as well. But thanks everyone for tuning in. Appreciate everyone joining in who participated in the comments. And make sure if you found this session helpful, hit us up with a like and a share. And hey, have a great remainder of the week. And I'll see everyone next week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time zone again. Thanks so much, everyone. And again, Emal, thanks so much.
Take care, everyone. Thanks, Dean.
See you, bro.
See you.